Last week on the show, we talked about when you're starting your real estate company, how you should, track your time so you have a good understanding of your overall return on investment, right? Because your time is a part of that as well. And we kind of got into some of that, how you can track it. Today, we're going to talk more about systematizing your business. I'll talk about some of the tech and the platforms and stuff that we've used and how that changes as you scale. And I think you need to be aware of it at the beginning, that you're going to start with stuff that that fits your budget and fits your portfolio, and it's going to have to change over time. And there's going to be certain periods where that growth is hard. It's hard to absorb financially, and it's hard to do it. But you have to get away as quick as possible if you want it to be a business from you doing absolutely everything, and you have to have systems running the business as well as people that you hire. So one of the quotes I had heard is, process runs your business, not your memory. And I think that's very true. Like I found myself a lot of times we'll go to buy a deal and then maybe it takes a year before we buy the other one. And instead of having an exact system in place, I'm just like, I'll remember the process. And then we go to buy the next one and I'm thinking back. I'm like, well, what comes first? Do we do this or what? And I'm asking people. So that's where we started probably about 2 years ago with our business, just everything that we do, trying to make a process for it. And then if you ever forget, and it's really helpful once you start to have employees too, because if you have one at the beginning, you're going to have one employee and they're going to do a bunch of stuff that even maybe you don't know how to do, right? As you grow, the property manager or the maintenance guy, he's going to be doing all these little things and he'll have in his head exactly how to do it. But if something ever happens to that person, it's like, how does that information get back to you? Or they take a week off and you can't get a hold of them. And then, that becomes a huge headache. Even if you're the guy that's doing it, you might not know how to do it. That's that way for us now, right? We have so many properties. I don't know exactly every key box combination and everything. So if you have somewhere where you store all of that information, and at the beginning it can be very easy. It could be a spreadsheet or anything like that, and you can kind of progress as you go along. But the process part of it has to be big, and a lot of that's going to be the systems that you use, right? The property management software. When we started out, we were using a company called Building Stack, and it worked really well. It had quite a few things all in one. It had a ticket system, did the payments, did the maintenance side of it, that in between the tenants. But what we found is, it worked really good up to maybe 200 units. But as we started to get bigger, then you ran into problems where it didn't integrate with it didn't integrate with our accounting software, for instance. So then we were entering, hundreds of transactions a month on one side, and we had to redo it on the other side. So now, on 500 transactions, you might be entering 1,500 things if you're doing it in 2 or 3 different softwares. So that's where, we had to change. We just switched our whole software system now, or our property management software. And that was kind of the reason. It didn't integrate well with a lot of the other things that we used. So this platform that we're using now, which is called ResMan, is supposed to integrate a lot better. It has its own accounting software. And anything that we plug into it talks to each other and it works a lot better, and it just saves those extra touch points. I don't think at the beginning it would have made sense financially or for any reason to use this, but we wanted to do it now. We're taking over another 140 units, and I didn't want to onboard the new tenants and then switch after that. So we made the decision to do it now. But there's always going to be those steps. Like with something like Building Stack, the pricing, I think from 1 unit to 100 is relatively the same. It's probably around that, maybe $100 a month if you want everything included. But then as soon as you get over 100, it's going to go to 500. This is an example, but I think it's something similar to this. So you only added 10 more units, but now you have $400 a month of extra cost. So there's always going to be those break points where you have to step up in the technology that you use, or you have to hire somebody new. And financially, you either have to stretch really, really thin or stretch everyone's capacity really thin, or you have to hire or bring on a new system a little bit early and just pay that extra cost. Because then to go from 500 to 800 units, there's probably no change in cost, right? It's a flat thing. And then from 800 to 1,500, it's actually going to get way cheaper per unit again. So with scale, a lot of things work better. And at the beginning, it's honestly, I've tried to think back to what we used on our very first property. I don't think for the first couple we had a property management software. We were probably at exactly 100 and some units before we put that in, just because the cost is so high. And it's kind of the similar with advertising. If you're using something like RentSync, which is what we use. That's pretty expensive every month if you only have a few properties listed, because there's going to be that minimum cost. So right now we're using, like I said, ResMan. And then on the maintenance side, which is a big part of it, the maintenance tracking, they integrate with a company called HappyCo. So we haven't actually started using that yet, but that is what we're going to be using. And it looks like it simplifies a lot of stuff and will make the process, like adding all the process and stuff, a lot easier on that side. So I'll maybe do an update once we get that going. I always look at like what the big landlords are doing too, or even when we went with ResMan, like how many clients do they have that are over 1,000 units? And that kind of gives you a gauge on what the technology is made for, because they're not all going to be the same, right? The really biggest ones aren't going to work for 10 units, and the ones that work well up to 100 units aren't going to work up to 1,000 necessarily. So it's hard to find something that fits everything, and there's always going to be that break point where you go from 50 units to 100 or whatever the number is, where you're going to have a big increase in price, and then it might stay kind of flat. I was trying to think back to other technologies that we have used or that we do use now. So when we do our move outs or move ins, we use a technology called Z Inspector. With the new system that we have, we're not going to have to use that anymore. It has its own add-on that we can use, but that was what we used. It was relatively cheap. You're going to need some kind of, depending if something like Building Stack, you could do tenant screening, but if you can't, you have to have a technology for that. Payment processing, it's the same thing. So there's quite a few things that you need, and that's quite a bit of cost that when you look at something like a pro forma on a building, you're not adding in all those costs, right? Because they're really on the property management side. But if you're the one doing it all, that's an extra cost, and it can be way more than the proportional amount of units when you're first starting out. I think the other big step is like hiring the first couple people, right? Because there's always that time when you can do everything yourself, and this depends if you're full time in the business or you're still working at a job and you want to hire someone to look after your property. But there's always going to be that time when like it really doesn't make sense to hire someone, but you can't keep up, and you have to almost overpay to get somebody to come in and help you. And then it'll get much cheaper if you take over another 50 units, because you probably don't need to hire that other person. But I think at the beginning, there is ways to mitigate that cost. You can get virtual assistants. We use for our call center, when you call for leads, it's an AI call center. I think it's like $50 a month. Then it's 24 hours. It sends a link. It sends the link to the property they're interested in, and they can book right from there. So they can go and book a showing. So that's something where we, instead of us getting a couple hundred calls a week or whatever the number would be, we have this for almost no cost. We can do that. We have an after hours call center, which is big if you don't want, because if tenants call the like some are going to call the emergency line because their tap is leaking, or because, there's it can be any little reason, a cabinet door falls off, and you don't want to be getting those calls at night. You don't want to be paying someone to wake up at night and get those calls. So that's where a call center can be a somewhat cost-effective way of doing it, and save you having to hire that person right away. But at some point, you're going to have to. And when we started the company, me and Kelsa, my wife, we were in a good spot where we had the money from our first business that we'd invested in the property, and we could kind of live off the income from the investment, and we didn't have to pay ourselves salaries to live out of the property management company. So we were in a position where we could hire people and not have to worry about covering our wages and theirs. So that's a benefit if you have a job that you can make your money at, and you're not having to take money out to live. You can probably hire somebody a little sooner there. And then I think too, there's kind of two types of people. I would be more of the, I have an idea and I'm like, let's do it. And we figure it out as we go. And then there's a lot of people that sit and just overcomplicate or overthink things. And they're going to sit there forever, just paralyzed by the fear of doing it. And neither way is right or wrong. But I think at the beginning, for sure, if you come from another business where it had lots of process and systems, you're like, hey, I want to do this now in my company. And there does need to be a balance, though, because one of the only benefits of being small is that you can move quickly, you can make decisions quickly, and the bigger guys have every other advantage. So at the very beginning, I think you do want to make sure that you put the process in place, but you're not overcomplicating it, right? Like when I always think of this now, when we hire a maintenance guy, we'll get guys that are super, like way overqualified, and they might be like just an absolute, as high up as you can go in one area, HVAC or whatever the area is. And at this point, we really don't need that. Like, I want a maintenance guy that can come in and do everything. If they have to pick up a little bit of garbage, if they have to work on the boiler, if they have to do a renovation, like for your first couple people, you need that person. You don't need every single thing structured perfectly, but you do need the basic, I guess, process in place. And even I was talking to the business group I'm part of about this. We're trying to build out, like, there's a way to manage 100 properties, and now we're going to be at 500, and we can do it using a squad system or whatever. But to get to 5,000 units, we're going to have to split it up where it's different sections of the portfolio are managed by different people. And I was kind of going through that, and one of the guys who's been in the group a lot longer than me said that he's done that a bunch in his business too, where he goes and you try to like plan for how big you'll get, right? And he said it's hard to do that at the beginning. Like, you can have that in your head, but you need to hire for who you need now, right? Because you don't know, that might be 2 years, it might be 10 years, and you're going to overcomplicate things at the beginning. So there's kind of that balance there. And I don't have the right answer. I think on the technology side too, even for us, from when we started till now, technology's changed so much and made it so much easier to manage bigger portfolios with less people. And I think we're going to see huge leaps forward in the next 2 to 3 years. So, if you're spending a bunch of money on technology now, it could completely change. And that's one of the scary things about it. But I think it's also a big benefit where we'll be able to manage a lot bigger portfolios with a lot less people, just with the technology that's coming. So that's a benefit. That's something to look forward to. So I think, it's really important. If you want freedom, if you want to grow your portfolio, you want that growth, your properties and your business need to kind of run without you, right? You can still be a big part of it, but you need to be out of the day-to-day. That needs to be the long-term plan. So you need to start thinking of that now and building out your plan for the future. Thanks for listening today. We'll see you guys next week.